Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show. I hate to go from a conversation about the New Orleans Saints and shift gears so abruptly and talk about something as difficult to talk about as teen suicide. I mentioned it earlier this week when I got the news that Aubrey Wyatt, a very young 13-year-old girl in Ocean Springs, took her own life over this past weekend, and it touched my heart. I mean, who cannot be alive with a beating heart and not be touched by the notion of a young person who seemingly has so much to look forward to? What would go on in her life that would cause her to take her own life? Such a poor decision, and what could have been built around her to engage her and the people who are around her to be more sensitive, to be more caring. What role do parents play? What role do administrators play? What role does teachers play? What role does the community play? What role do I play in having conversations about this that aren't conversations that are going to lend results 5 years down the road, but that can touch people in this moment, why the rawness is still there, why the thought of how in the world did this happen? Again, I might add. Again, how did this happen again in Jackson County? How do we talk about it? How do we learn something from it that's going to touch people in some kind of positive way that can potentially change a similar outcome from occurring again in another young person's life? This is the thoughts that I have. And I just, I find myself just staring at the picture of Aubrey Wyatt, just staring at her and thinking to myself, what a beautiful young girl. How in the world can something like this happen? And I know it's complicated. As psychologists listen to this, and I've read so much about it, there's so many contributing factors to a situation like this, and we don't know at all what this young woman was going through. All we know is her final act that caused this conversation. But I know it's something that experts say we can head off at the past. We can do something about it. So I hope that having conversations about it will help all of us come to grips with the role that we play, one young person at a time. And I couldn't think of a better person to have in this conversation as my friend Paige Roberts, the executive director from the Jackson County Chamber, because Paige and I have talked about this before, unfortunately, about other young people who have committed suicide. And Paige, I'm laying it out there and from the heart how I feel about it. And I know there's a role that I can play, and I know that you believe strongly there's a role you can play, and you've been working on this. Talk to me more about that.
Sure. I am a strong believer that we as a community owe it to ourselves to grapple with the hard topics and the hard, messy parts of life. And this is one of them. Mental health is one of them. How our well-being is one of them. And so, as you know, since I came into this role at the Jackson County Chamber of Commerce 4 years ago, the board of directors and the search committee who tapped me for this job were very clear that they wanted the chamber to be more policy-driven and more relevant to all things that make the community go and thrive. And some of those policies have been education, workforce development, health, and mental health. But it's always such a complex issue when you delve into mental health that it becomes overwhelming itself, and you don't know where to begin, or you see that you're not going to get very far very fast, and it's discouraging. But one of the things that we have been working on with our partner, Singing River Health System, is this continued focus on mental health, and especially as Jackson County has now seen that we know of the third teenage suicide in less than a year and a half. So 2 of them were 8th graders. 1 of them was an 11th grader, two females and 1 male. And the sort of the reasons or the life instances that happened leading up to each of the suicides are very different, but the commonality, of course, is that they were in so much pain that they wanted it to stop. And the Singing River Health System brought in a young woman named Emma Benoit from Louisiana who just turned 23. But when she was 16, she shot herself in the chest as a way to kill herself, was not successful, and put herself in a wheelchair instead. But she's used these 7 years as a way to get healthy and to have a message to share. And she promotes a group called Hope Squad, and it's a peer-to-peer model that we are looking at with our superintendents of the school districts and our Education Workforce Development Committee on what it might look like, or can it look like, to try the Hope Squad model. And so hopefully we'll have more details about that, and people that can hear Emma and know about Hope Squad later this fall. What Emma said when I heard her speak, Ricky, that again I find very poignant on this topic, is these kids are not looking to die. They are looking for peace away from pain. And I have shared this in other platforms before, but I have struggled with depression for years. I've been medicated for the past 20 years, and I see professionals who help manage my medications and cognitive therapy counseling. But I have been in the place. I have never attempted suicide, but I have been in the place of thinking that was the place, the direction I needed to go, and started planning it. So I have a very deep understanding of the darkness that overwhelms a person. And I believe that where we need to move in our community is toward how we are, of course, treating each other, but how we are treating ourselves. I mean, a lot of my issue is negative narrative, false narrative in my head. I believe these 3 kids at some level also had false narratives going on in their head. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not liked enough. I'm not popular enough. I'm no good at this. I'm no good at that. And it's the messages that we're telling ourselves, and how we're using social media so detrimentally instead of in the positive ways it can be used, that's all contributing to this. And how we feel about ourselves and each other, and how we connect it, and how we make other people feel, I think, is getting drastically overlooked. And we're not preparing our young people for the resilience and the grit that it takes to say, you may not like me, but that's okay, because I like me and I have something to offer. And these, there are developmental issues in the brain that lead teenagers to not understand that. But I think many of us as adults are not understanding this.
I think you're definitely right about that. Many of us as adults don't fully appreciate it. I say it all the time, and neither one of us pretend to be psychologists, but we have both had our moments in our lives that have been difficult for us. Same for me. I think I admire the way that you've turned your situation into a positive where you're giving back to the community and you're willing to sort of put yourself out there in that kind of a way. I personally have not been in a situation where I contemplated suicide, for example. Okay. But I've had tough times. You know, I can remember as a child. I mean, I dealt with bullying. I mean, maybe we all did at some point. But the thing that's very clear, Paige, is that we never know where where someone is in their lives. We never know what they're going through. So when we come back on the other side, we'll pick it up from there, and we'll continue the conversation with Paige Roberts. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Mathews Show. Paige Roberts from the Jackson County Chamber, who's been really active in the community around the notion of teen mental health for very good reason, especially in the wake of, as she pointed out, 3 suicides in the past year and a half of young people. This is something we need to be thinking about. When we went to break, I said that you never know what someone is going through. And, you know, one thing, Paige, this is a complex issue that you and I are talking about now. So we only have 6 minutes and 50 seconds to finish this segment. We will end with the thought that you and I will bring Emma, the young woman you talked about a few minutes ago, who attempted suicide, and has now inspired this effort that you're getting your head around now. We'll have both of y'all back on the show soon. But one thing I have spent a lot of time thinking about, and I've read a lot about it, is the impact of social media on young people, especially young girls. And really specifically, if you take the mindset that you were just talking about, where their own self-image of themselves is so critical, that in and of itself leads some kids to attempt suicide. Okay, but then you add to that the pressures of needing to sort of live up to something on social media, and then the cyberbullying that can come from that, and other types of bullying that can come from that. We don't know the role that aspect played in any of the conversations that we would have around each of these young people. But the studies are pretty fundamentally specific about how damaging it can be to a young person's psyche. We've got to really have a serious conversation about bullying within the context of all of this, don't we?
Yes, and I think it's about how we treat each other. Like I said, it's about how we make someone else feel when we're with them. And quite frankly, it sounds simple enough, but just treating your neighbor as you would like to be treated yourself. I mean, it's the golden rule from centuries ago, but we have somehow become a people that is so wrapped up in the materialism or the superficialism or the outside container that are our physical bodies or what we drive or what we wear, that we have not done much justice to who we really are in our spirit. I mean, I've had a pastor, and I'm sure you've heard this said before, Ricky, we are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. So we have to be kind to each other and thoughtful and present, and we have to listen. And that means listening to body language as well. And if you feel like something's off with someone, sincerely ask them how they're doing, not just, hey, how are you? Or make it so that if they do tell you how they really feel, that they're sorry that they did, because
Paige,
it turns out you didn't really want to hear it.
Paige, you think about the role that school districts play, that schools play, that teachers play, that administrators play, that counselors play, that psychologists play, that grandparents and parents and friends play. I think about, listen, I have a lot of friends of mine, and I watch them. I watch their kids with their kids. And, you know, and my daughter's a third grade teacher, incidentally, so I have a lot of insights into what's happening in schools today. But you got fourth and fifth and sixth graders with phones that just sit there on their phones now. The kids that parents are giving phones to they're younger and younger and younger, and they're developing incredible habits. When they post family pictures, the young child usually is never looking at the scenery. They're usually looking at a phone, even in the pictures that they post. So I had this image that there's a kid that's a friend of mine, and their kids over there looking at their phone, and they're quiet. As long as they're quiet, the parent's happy. Okay, but this image I have is that they're engaged. They're in doing some cyberbullying as the parent is watching. The parent has no idea that they're even doing it because they're quiet. And I think the role parents have to play with kids is know what they're doing. Pay more attention to what they're doing. To talk more about being empathetic and caring about the people around them. And I mean, it's complicated, but since the program that Emma is part of now seems to me that's what they're attempting to draw out, I'm assuming.
Well, it's like I said, it's peer to peer, and they actually identify them. They have a method of identifying the students in the school that are already sort of the go-to kids if you want advice, or you want to be cheered up, or not even just cheered up. That's actually, here's another thing that Emma said that was extremely valuable to hear, and that is the phrase toxic positivity. Toxic positivity is when you always say, oh, everything will be all right. Somebody is worse off than you. We've got to quit that, and we've got to be real.
Well, this is only the beginning of a long conversation that we're going to have about it. You and Emma will come back on my show at the next available opportunity to get our calendars in sync. We'll continue to talk about it. But, I mean, inside families, I need to talk about it. If you've got kids that are anywhere near these ages, have conversations, man. Know what's going through their minds. Know about how they treat their friends. Tell them to play a role in empathy of the people that surround them. We've got to start somewhere. One kid at a time is, I guess, a place to start. God bless you, my friend Paige. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Ricky.
Have a solemn weekend. I'm sorry to end on such a depressing.
No, it is what it is. I'm glad that people are talking about this, because it used to be when a teenager died of suicide, it was all hush hush and nobody talked about it. But if a child dies of a car accident, it's a whole other thing. So I'm thrilled that we're talking about it. We just have to talk about it responsibly. And that's my fear here.
Yeah, I agree. Well, listen, have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday.
Thanks, you too. Bye, Kyle.
Okay, thanks.